Story 1 Christmas Animatronics. Warren Turney steps back into the kitchen, sees the overflowing pot of pasta water, and curses, quickly shuffling over. To pull the lid off, he stirs, and sticking the thin spaghetti, and lowers the heat. The pot continues to boil, but now under control. He looks up at the clock above the stove, and he checks it against his wristwatch. Seeing he has plenty of time, he decides to check the shop anyway, feeling some doubt about the time. White Christmas lights outline the edges of the shop wall, hanging just below the exterior roof. Inside, small splotches of multicolored light sit around the fixed animatronic figures. The figures were laid out across the room, some tucked together and others hidden behind small shop displays. Each figure was dark and unlit, without their lights and features turned on. He looked at two figures that stood in front of a model chestnut stand, who stared back at him with an uncanny smile. He wondered why he'd set them up that way, and made a note to change the setup in the morning. The rest of the room looked correct at first glance, but he still looked around, checking each individual basket and making sure the portions were correct. Each gift was properly laid out, and he relaxed, moving back toward the kitchen. The picture of his son and his family hung on the wall, just to the right of the stove, and his eyes were drawn toward it, wishing it made him feel better. Despite being in a frame, the photos seemed faded and haunted. The pasta finished cooking, and he strained it into the sink with sauce simmering on the stove. As the boiling water poured into the sink, a voice softly rang through the store. "Chestnuts, get your chestnuts here." The voice, soft and subtle, sent a shiver up Warren's spine, and he immediately dropped the pot into the sink. Pasta half drained and water dripping out. He moved back into the store and quickly started searching. Confused and unsettled, he was sure he had followed each step correctly, and he checked his watch again, trying to find a reason. He stared at the time when a loud rapping against the storefront door jerked him out of his stupor. Warren looked up and saw someone standing on the porch, shrouded by the darkness of the night and the shadows cast by the window lights. Warren could not get a good look at his face, and found himself jerking his head back and forth trying to decipher it. Eventually he gave up and opened the door slightly. "We are closed," Warren said as soon as the door was barely ajar. He held it that way, still not quite getting a good view of the man. "Please, I swear I just need a moment," the figure said. "What could you possibly need?" Warren asked. "People in town say you have a way to turn things around." "My family, well, it seems we just don't have the right luck." Warren softened and opened the door wider. "You are looking for the right gift then?" Warren asked. The man nodded, and Warren glanced at the shop clock just above the door, feeling slightly relieved as he looked at the time. "Well, I am closed for tonight, and it's getting too late for me to let anyone come in." The man nodded again, dejected. "Tomorrow morning, though, come by first thing, and I think I will have the right thing for you," Warren finished. "Thank you, sir," the man said. "Thank you, I am serious. I cannot tell you enough." Warren nodded and waved the man away. The man left quickly, and Warren turned back from the door, shoving his hands down into his pockets. He tried to sort out his thoughts, but felt cloudy and unsure. He dug the food out of the sink, trying to salvage what he could. He ate silently, staring straight ahead and looking at nothing. His plate was nearly cleared of the burnt tasteless food when he heard another knock. At the door, he left his plate on the table and finished, but moved slower, and before late-night visitors were not common. But they happened, and he thought that with the season moving closer to the holidays he ought to be ready for more. As he passed through the shop portion of the building, he again felt something off. But after checking the clock, he ignored the feeling as nerves. Outside, a man once again stood on his porch. When the door swung open, he saw that the man from before had returned. Feeling unreality wash over him, Warren opened the door and looked out. "Yes," Warren asked. He started to say more, but the man spoke before he could. "Please, a moment." "What?" Warren asked. Wine swirled in the background, but despite it Warren heard the words clearly, even though he did not believe them. His spine tingled as he felt watched, as if something moved around in the room behind him. "Someone said you were the right person. You know something, don't you?" he said. "Is this some kind of joke?" Warren asked. "Do not come back here tomorrow. I wanted to give you a chance, but well, clearly I was wrong." "Gee." He started to close the door, but heard something behind him and stopped. Fire crackled through the shop and rang in Warren's ears, forcing him to turn back and look over his shoulder. He turned back as the man started speaking again. "Dear blessed sir," the man said, "I thank you for your help. What is wrong with you?" Warren said, growing angry, "I told you to go away." Warren reached out unconsciously and pushed the man away. The man reacted quickly, grabbing Warren's wrists and pulling him close before whispering in his ear. "They're awake," the man said, then released Warren's wrist. Warren reached back out and grabbed at where the man had been. The wind blew hard and sharp against his face, forcing him back inside. Now the smell of smoke was overwhelming, and he looked around for the source. As he did, a faint glow lurked in the back of the room, staring back at him. The animatronics seemed to have turned toward him, and he felt several pairs of eyes staring back at him. The clock above the shop door rang out at the same time the clock in the kitchen chimed, marking the hour of midnight. Warren looked at his watch, unbelieving, and saw that all three had sensed and displayed an impossible time. Hours had seemed to pass in minutes as time distorted around him. No, that cannot be," he said. He hurried to each of the bowls and checked the offerings. Each one was full and untouched. Panic spread through Warren, and he rushed to complete the ritual, knocking bowls off and spilling the contents. He knew it was too late, but still he fumbled through th. He processed desperately. His heart started pounding harder as he moved quickly through each bowl until he reached the last one, which sat completely empty. Warren looked up and watched as it crept toward him. Each step he took backward sent shooting pains through his chest until he slipped and fell to the ground. His heart screamed, and his last vision was of being surrounded on all sides. Read to the temple fair, the red lanterns hanging along. The streets cast a faint glow, bathing everything in a blood-red hue. But this would change at midnight, when the moon shines full, a festival. Oh, if the undead would appear, the streets don't sleep, nor would the fair end. Little Shanchen wandered in the streets, the warm lantern lights and crowded streets behind her, making the little girl its silver hair less noticeable in the crowd. Shanchen had sneaked out of her house this evening and mysteriously got lost in the mist. Then she found herself in the middle of this noisy temple fair, But something was different about this fair. Everyone attending was a ghost or a demon. Spirits with heads of cows and horses fill the fair, while dog demons shout on the streets, selling tea. The most attractive roast chicken that Shanchan had ever seen. Even though Shanchan's grandma had always told her these stories of ghosts and demons, Shanchan was frightened by the sight. She runs into the crowd, trying hard not to scream out. She keeps running until Shanchan bumps into a lady wearing a fabric cloak and a straw hat. So sore. Sorry, miss, Shanchan squeaked, her voice trembling in fear. The lady, a slim figure, turned back, lifting her straw hat. She looked human, but her skin was pale and bloodless, and her eyes were dark and unsettlingly red. The odd crouched down, patting Shanchan's head. Her hand felt warm, unlike the fog that surrounded Shanchan. Have you ever heard about wandering ghosts? The lady said, her voice as soft but recognizable, a creature strapped between yin and yang. The actions they once performed, pointless, and yet they persist. The lady smiled, but didn't continue. For some reason, Anshan felt she could trust her. She held the lady's hand as they walked deeper into the temple fair. About wandering ghosts, Shanchan suddenly asked, "Is it from a folk story? Have you never heard?" The lady asked. "My grandma used to tell me ghost stories," Shanchan said, "but she never told the story about wandering ghosts. Wandering ghosts appear because of unfinished desires or strong regrets before death," the lady started. "Once there was a village that starved because of famine. The villagers, before death, wished for an endless festival, where there would always be plenty of food and no one would starve. As much food as the landlords own," Shanchan asked. "More than the landlords would ever own," the lady answered gently. They stopped in front of a shop, and inside a demon with the head of a cow greeted them. He sold roasted duck, which was twice as large as any Shanchan had ever seen, its crispy red skin fragrant and inviting. The lady bought some, dropping some coins onto the counter. "Here, have some." The lady passed Shanchan the duck leg, which was warm and greasy, typically favored by a child like Shanchan. She bites into the duck. The crispy skin melted into savory sweetness, giving way to the perfectly tender meat inside. They sat on benches far away from the noisy crowd while Shanchan finished her duck leg. The lady took a pink fruit from her sleeve and bit into it. Shanchan noticed and looked at the fruit with curiosity. "Would you like one?" the lady asked her, passing Shanchan one of the juicy pink fruits. "I'm fine, thank you," Shanchan said, passing the fruit back to the lady. "I remember seeing that kind of fruit with my friends just out in the forest. Even though they look sweet and juicy, the fruit has a strong and bitter taste and an unbearable sourness." The lady paused for a second, looking at the pink fruit in her hand. "Have you lost your taste?" Shanchan asked her. "True, I cannot taste the fruit fully," the lady answered. "You don't need to feel pity for me. Souls who walked far along this path had always lost some parts of them, but deep down I can still taste a sense of sweetness in the red juice, faintly, but I know it's there." After their short meal, the lady accompanied Shanchan, walking among the temple fair. The skies started to darken, and rain started to fall through the skies, extinguishing the lanterns. The lady opened an umbrella, sheltering herself and Shanchan. The paper umbrella was patterned red an eye-catching color contrasting with the gray surroundings. She stared into the puddle of water, which now reflected her image and the gloomy surroundings behind her. The only sound that could be heard was the rain dropping into the shallow lake. This rain seemed to have never stopped, the girl said. Maybe it's because some resentment had not yet been solved. Have you ever heard of wandering ghosts? The lady asked. A creature wandering among yin and yang, repeating certain actions they once did. Pointless, but still one had stayed with me for long tea. Emmy, the little girl held out her hands, trying to feel the rain, but the raindrops fell straight through her transparent hands, dropping into the lake that had formed beneath them. A famine struck many years ago, caused by a flood. It completely devastated this town. The lady sighed. Everyone left. But those who stayed, young children and old people who could not, Washington, L.K. Farr, starved to death in this village. I remember now, the girl said. It turns out to be that. I am already dead, yes, and you came and stay. Me, it is my job to look after every soul crossing to the far side, the lady answered. Even if that is meaningless, even if it is meaningless, some jobs must be done. I understand. The soul a young child once named Shanchan said softly. The rain slowly stopped, and a ray of sunlight started to appear among the horizons. Before I leave, can you tell me what lies among the distant shores? The soul asked. The lady smiled at her gently, folding her umbrella. Beyond the shore, you would find a land void. But don't be afraid. A mark of red would be there to guide your way. That is the color of existence. Embrace it, and may it end your long dreams. She reached out and held Shanchan's hand. I can guide you part of the way, but you must walk the rest alone. I can't. Odie accompany you further before you leave. Can you tell me your name? The lady smiled and whispered something in Shanchan's ear, which were quickly dissolved by the wind and blown towards the far shore. Story 3, Mother of All Crazy Creeks, September 27th. Dad might have peed his pants a little when his old dog showed up on our doorstep. I still don't really understand why. He's always touted that old life begins anew when new things die, and now he's been proven right, but he's not proud. Oh yeah. By the way, Melissa's gone. No biggie. Dad's old. The dog is our new dog now. She probably wandered into the creek like those deer from last week. I had given up on trying to find her. I mean, weird stuff is bound to happen when you live next to a creek that brings dead things back. To life. I'll have to postpone asking him the question. By the way, I gifted him a diary yesterday, and I hope he likes it. 27th of September. Dearly beloved, new friend, old life begins anew, and new things die. This truth is a constant in my studies, and poor Melissa had to pay the price. The fog will prove purple in due time, of course. In the meantime, it seems that our constant recreational encounters with death have desensitized my daughter. September 28th. I appreciate our new dog. Dad, not so much, apparently. Having the puppy raised with Mom come back all grown up brings up some unpleasant memories. October 1st. Caught Dad crying while hugging the dog today. It doesn't seem to remember him yet. Idiot dog. I still haven't gotten the chance to ask him anything. October 5th. Dad and I went to the graveyard today. I couldn't build the confidence to ask him anything. But I did get the corpse of some Midwestern guy named Arthur. I threw him into the creek, and I kid you not, the first thing he did after coming back was ask to go to the bathroom. He wasn't even done with accepting the fact that his bottom half was gone before he dissolved. Shame we can't bring them back twice. He seemed like a cool guy. Also, the fog on the creek is changing hues. 5th of October. I saw a strange look on my daughter's face today as her growing brain processed the fog's color shift. I will tell her the truth about my experiments soon. October 6th. Mom's birthday is next week, so Dad's a little depressed. It's been I don't know how long. I wish I could remember her until I can ask him those questions. I'm no different from that demented golden retriever. Thank you for helping me remember the things that are happening, though. October 7th. Went by the creek alone today. Its fog is more purple than yesterday. Dad's out hunting. Digging up the past is one heck of a pastime. Pastime, note to self. Ask Dad how you write it. Anyway, got this old lady from the 1800s. She was more surprised by the fact that she couldn't see her own reflection in the water and the fact that she was alive again. She was weird. I'm glad she dissolved quickly. It's funny, though. 7th of October. Lately, the long hours of my waking have been spent on the test, a reality I unfortunately must distort to my dear, innocent Ellie. I will explain some truths about the creek to her in a couple of days. Not the whole truth, however. That will have to wait. October 8th. Creek's foggy today. The fog is more purple than usual. It's getting cold. Tried to ask him today, but he was holding up the dog and crying again. It's becoming a problem. October 9th. Dad finally explained to me how the creek works for living things. He taught me that if live things are submerged, they dissolve and bring a dead thing of their choice back to life. What? He also said to never try it. It's unnatural. I promptly reminded him that he's a former biologist nerd who now hunts deer for our only source of food. I also reminded him that we throw corpses into a body of water that talk to them for half a minute before they disappear. None of this is natural. I kind of wish that he would give me answers to the question that I actually want to know the answer to. Then again, I haven't asked them yet. October 11th. Forgot to write yesterday. Was too busy pondering the implications of what Dad said the day before. If Melissa chose to bring back tea, he golden retriever. Does that mean that she had free will? Did they know each other? Does this have anything to do with the increasingly purple fog? These questions are so unimportant. UALE. October 12th. Tomorrow's Mom's birthday. I think I'll ask Dad those questions. 12th of October. Martha's birthday is tomorrow. I will honor her sacrifice. I will fix my mistake. She will return to our embrace. October 13th. After waking up, I found Dad by the creek. He told me that he woke up early to catch the sunrise. He lied. I was up all night, as per us, but didn't hear him come back from hunting at all, and the wood floors are creaky enough for mice to make noise. Plus, I recognize those circles around his eyes. They are the same ones that I see in the mirror every morning. Still, I ask him the question, Daddy, why can't I remember what Mom looked like or anything else before I turned 10? He looked at me, then he walked away. What? October 14th. Dad has been in the woods all day, so I had to talk to the stupid dead things. October 15th. Dad's back still hasn't talked to me, though, and he's crying with the dog again. October 16th. I made him some deer stew for dinner, and he seems happier. He's funny again. He's also accepted the golden retriever as a member of the family, as he is going to take it to dig up the past with us next week. I am so looking forward to next week's creek time with the new dog. That said, it's hard to take him seriously when his beard is smudged with stew. 17th of October. My wonderful daughter made me some stew yesterday. It was warm like her laughter, and something breaks inside me every time I must withhold the truth from her gentle gaze. October 18th. I went by the creek again today. It's beautiful this time of year. The leaves are starting to yellow, and the bears are finally gone. I didn't bring any skeletons with me, however. I figured I could use the silence to think about whether I should ask him the question again. Probably not. I still remember that look on his face when I asked him that question. October 19th. I couldn't sleep at all last night. I couldn't shake off the thought of asking him the question again. But I knew that I couldn't, so I did what any normal person will and went by the creek alone at night hunting. Dad wasn't here to stop me like he had always done. He's been out late into the night more lately. Its surface reflected the gentle moonlight and reddening trees. I peered into it, but this time I couldn't see my own reflection. The moonlight must have done some crazy magic with it. Either way, I stayed there until the sun rose, and I could see my reflection again. Then I came home, but Dad was still out, so I made stew, left it out, and went into the woods to see if I could find him. I couldn't. He's CK now, though, and he's furiously writing his new journal. I will get my hands on his Princess Diaries. There's probably not much on there, though. He's just gotten back to it. 19th of October. I have been pondering lately whether I should tell my daughter the truth. She will soon find out about my experiments and the truth about herself. With Ellie around, I know not whether to continue those experiments. What if she learns of the truth herself? She is a brilliant girl. I will not lose her again. I must tell her. Yet the silence of the creek whispers gently into my ears. It yearns for me. I yearn for it. I must try again. October 20th. Turns out the creek also works at night. I threw in this dashing Daniel from the 1960s. You should have seen his reflection kissed. By the moonlight he had beautiful pecs. It was majestic. He's older than Dad, though, so. October 21st. I have completely forgotten about the questions for the past couple of days. I don't think I'll ask them anymore. Creek o'clock with the dog, and Dad is coming up. That's fun. Maybe I'll ask him about the purpling fog. Going to sleep now. No, to self. Steal his new diary once he leaves the cabin tomorrow for comedy material on Creek Day. October 22nd. What in the actual heck does Dad mean by telling me the truth and his experiments? It's back to the crazy creek instead of sleeping again. I guess tomorrow should clear things up. 23rd of October. Friend, I do not know what I must do. I told Ellie the truth today, all of it. She knows of herself and her mother and my experiments. Now the burden of truth lies on my back no longer. It is now hers to bear. I pray to the Lord that she will find it in her heart to forgive me one dawn when the sun's rays reflect a violet fog, and the limbo between then my experiments must continue. October 23rd. My life is a lie, and the dog's life is a lie, and everything is a lie. Dad took me to the creek tonight and finally answered my question about my memory. He explained why I couldn't see myself or the dog in the creek at night. We are on. He in the same undead. The thing was brought back by our old dog drowning in the lake. I was brought back by my mother drowning herself. That explains the memory gap. Mom died so I could come back to hell. Ife, but I still can't remember her voice or her face or anything else about her. I must help him bring back Mom, whatever the cost may be. Story for Arla's memory, the hollow sound of the lot. November wind blew through the wide brick alleyway. Standing around the factories had become quite a depressing pastime for Arla, although she found in it a certain discreet imagination, creativity, Ori, as she strolled through the cold wind that wished for summer. She could easily imagine it being hot and dry desert sand blowing against her face, for it was just as bitter. The intermittent torrents of wispier and more liberated streams of sand shut Arla's eyes, and the howling wind that barreled down the alleyway as though it were a wide tunnel made her finally look away. She had recalled this place many times. The alleyway always helped her see it, a desert place in the far reaches of her imagination, or someone else's. The factories that surrounded her transform it into small ruins of concrete. The sickly white calm lake of clouds in the sky dissipated to reveal a huge golden sun high above the horizon. She was marching through the desert. She suddenly felt pangs of mortal fear thudding in her chest. She felt like she was nearly going to faint from dehydration. She saw the ruins getting closer. She was marching toward them. They looked like small, rectangular monuments. Their shadows stretched across the desert, elongated by the gradually setting sun. Off to the right was a doorway. It opened up into the sand. What could that be? Against her will, she found herself rising from the ground and being rocketed toward it. She was being held. Someone had picked her up and was carrying her. She squirmed. She felt a man's arms, and she could not escape from their grip. The doorway rapidly came closer. It led into pitch darkness. Arla tried to scream, but her mouth was muffled. Time began to feel much slower as her mind flipped into fight or flight, and she flailed her arms and punched the man wherever she could. All was inevitable. The slow approaching doorway into total darkness was a new memory that would forever haunt Arla. Arla felt a hand rubbing against her shoulder, and she slowly opened her eyes. She saw the large brick mill building on one side of the street, and the towering metal factory rise on the other. A man stared down at her. He had a long gray beard and a faded, dusty face. He wore several tattered coats in layers. Some were leather, others denim, others cloth. "Are you all right, you girl?" he said raspily before retreating into a coughing fit. "You've been lying here 30 minutes. Arla gasped and sat up, crawling backward into some bags. She looked around and slowly sighed, realizing where she was. She grunted, shaking her head. She then focused her eyes on the man intently, attempting to discern whether or not he was a threat. The man seemed to march in circles as he mumbled, "You shouldn't, young teenager, been out here. See, that's dangerous. For you it is. I saw a woman get robbed 10 months, years, he chuckled strangely. You should get out. It's no safe place. You see, not so many people to help. Arla nodded slowly as she gaped at the man cautiously. She then scrambled to her feet and turned, head around to see the man's encampment. A small sleeping bag and a pack of beer, and about 5 stuffed bags. She pulled the hood of her gray hoodie over her semi-long black hair and walked off in slight embarrassment, realizing that she must have been intruding in his space when she'd passed out. Arla had experienced the memory of the desert since she was a child, but the man carrying her through the strange doorway was new. She wondered woefully why this was happening to her now as she made her way home across the city of Elizabeth, New Jersey. She made her way from the factories to the river. She walked along the path past the drab city buildings. She began to hurry as the sun was nearing the horizon in the cloudy sky and it was getting chilly. She reached her home about 40 minutes. It was a large, nearly dilapidated house in a small lot with stalky grass. She stepped up to the large porch and opened the creaky screen door before removing her boots as she stepped. Head up the step in front of the main door. She shoved it open, as it often got stuck. She turned left to the kitchen, where some dish with beans and rice was cooking. Honey, where have you been? You need to take the trash out. And have you been taking your meds? Yes, Mama, said Arla sullenly, brushing off her mom's interrogation. Her mom, W., as a tall woman in her 40s who would wear tight, dark-colored skirts in an attempt to appear somewhat more affluent than she was. This contrasted with the fact that she sometimes had to sacrifice ingredients when putting food on the table. TCH, you need some friends, Arla. You gotta stop walking out there on your own. It's not safe. What's the point in making friends if I'm getting out of here soon? If they accept you, I have good faith in you, Arla, but you should work on your social skills to prepare for college. I know how to make friends, Mom, Arla muttered, leaving the house with the trash bag. She ate half her dinner and went to bed early, finding herself exhausted from the stress her daydream had brought. The next day, she would go to San Bernardino for an open house at the university there. She had been anxious about the trip, but she was particularly anxious now, as San Bernardino was near a desert. She kept trying to rationalize away any possibility of a connection between where she was going and her dreams. Memories, she called them. She didn't quite know why, but she'd always seen them as memories. Some part of her was determined to believe they had been real once. She eventually managed to force herself to sleep, despite still being somewhat nervous that she would experience the memory again. She dreamed she saw a car on the side of THE street by the desert. The car was a Rolls-Royce, and it was parking. She tried to look away from the car, but only saw a blur on either side in her vision. A man in a black suit emerged from the front of the car and opened the passenger door. He beckoned her in. Something compelled her to obey, and she moved forward, unable to stop herself. She saw only a black void inside the car or as she leaned forward into it, Arla woke in a sweat. She saw the alarm said it was 3 a.m. and she put her head in her hands and started crying. I can't take it, she screamed. I can't take it. Take me away from it. Her mom rushed into the room to see what was the matter, flicking the light on her way in. She comforted Arla as she curled up and cried. At around noon, Arla's plane took off into the clear, sunny sky. She stared out the window at farms organized into rectangles that seemed to repeat forever. Her parents had often not been present when she was a CH. Hilda, as her father was often gone on business meetings, both of her parents had been quite distant. Then Arla began developing her dissociations. Whenever she gathered enough mental clarity to reflect on them, she would trace them back to one experience, a car accident. She had hit her head and so could not remember most of it. But apparently her parents had been driving past Thomas E. Factories. The one memory she had of it was in the aftermath. A strange, tall man in a black suit walked by the wreck and had grazed her shoulder with his hand, and ever since she had experienced these strange dreams. Arla found the dreams were stronger when she was wandering around that place, and she was drawn to it. She would stroll around there at least twice a week after school, when her parents caught her wandering and discovered that was why she was often late returning from school. They got her a psychiatrist who put her on antipsychotic medications. These medications gave her a slew of other symptoms and only seemed to make it somewhat harder to access her dream memories. But the strange thing was that they also attenuated her memory of normal events. Given that none of these medications worked well, she would often dread taking them and neglected to do it consistently, in part out of a desire to unravel the meaning of her own dreams. Arla aspired to study psychology. California State University San Bernardino was one of several schools she was looking at, but it would possibly be one of the easier ones to enroll in. She sighed as she stared out the window and eventually dozed off. Arla exited the airport and awaited an Uber that would take her to the university's campus. She stepped out of the airport lobby to see the white sun blazing overhead in the clear sky. She shivered in the hot air. Despite the heat, she was still wearing her gray hoodie. She pulled it over her head. She waited a while outside the airport as cars went by. In the curbside lanes, she periodically kept checking her phone. Her Uber appeared to be stuck in traffic. After about 30 minutes of waiting, she looked up from a game she was playing on her phone and gasped with shock. A black Rolls-Royce had pulled up directly in front of her. The front door opened and a tall man in a black suit emerged. He had a gaunt, bony face and sleek, cool, tea-back black hair. He smiled pleasantly at Arla as though he'd been expecting her. She shivered with fear. He stepped over to the passenger door and opened it. He beckoned her over. Her breath rattled with apprehension. She looked back at her Uber app and found that her ride had arrived. She anxiously looked at the driver's description. To her shock, it showed a headshot of the man with the combed-back hair, and the car was listed as a Rolls-Royce. She swore it had previously shown a Mazda driven by a shorter man. She began to think the worst, but went through her breathing exercise and counted 5 things she could see aside from the man and the car: the sidewalk, people darting to and fro, palm trees lining the streets, the roof hanging over the platform, and mountains in the distance. She felt the ridges in the metal bench on which she sat, the slight breeze around her, the heat in the air, and her hand on her black jeans. She listened to the sounds around her, people chattering loudly, the engines of cars, and the squeaking of bus brakes, and the sound of reggaeton thumping from someone's car speakers. She smelled cigarettes on the air and someone's cologne. She tasted the bubble gum she had been chewing. She looked once again at the man. He was standing patiently with the door still open, and his pleasant smile was frozen in place. She begged, and to consider that perhaps her Uber driver had changed at some point when she hadn't been looking at the app. Nevertheless, she decided to cancel the trip. I can wait for an other one just to be safe, she thought. After canceling the trip, she stood up and tried to walk away from the strange car. She tried to remain calm, keeping her breathing deep and slow and focusing on the things she'd identified around her. She found herself staring into the man's eyes. His gaze was somehow too powerful for her to resist, and she found herself hypnotized. She was walking toward the car. She was overcome with fear and dread as the car door came closer to her, and everything she had noticed about her surroundings vanished. The doorway of the car got larger and larger until the tan interior of the car wrapped around her, and she found herself sitting down on the soft leather seat. The door was shut and the car was moving. Her mouth was dry and she found it difficult to speak. For a while, she couldn't bring herself to say anything at all, as she saw towns outside the window give way to plains and eventually to desert. She stared intently at the tall man in the driver's seat and finally mustered the courage to speak. Mister, this doesn't look like it's the way to the university." "Why, of course not." The man spoke smoothly. "You canceled the trip." Arla's heart sank. "Okay, yes, so can you please let me out?" No, he chuckled grimly. "Now we go where I want to go." Arla sat in the tense silence that followed. As the car continued on down a highway, she could see nothing around but desert at this point. Besides, there's nowhere you could go out here, and no service, the man continued. "No, you'd best stay with me." Arla urgently checked her phone and saw there was indeed no service. She pressed emergency call on her lock screen, and it attempted to dial. To her dismay, a message appeared saying, Ting, no service. Where are you taking me?" she cried, beginning to panic. "You know where we're going, Arla," the man said calmly. Arla recalled the ruins from her doctor. She couldn't believe this was happening, and that she would be stupid enough to get into this car. She leaned against the window and tried breathing deeply, slowly calming her thumping heart. It must be a dream, she thought. By repeating that enough times, she eventually managed to convince herself it was, and she dozed off. To her horror, Arla woke to find she was still in the car. Had stopped. She looked out the window. The sun was beginning to get low in the sky, and there was still only desert in all directions, save for some distant mountains. The man opened the door. "This is it. Now get out," he ordered sternly. She sat there, frozen in place and unable to look at him. Soon she found herself being pulled out of the car and carried across the desert. To her dread, he saw the rectangular ruins up ahead. They looked somewhat like the base of a building that had burned down long ago. The sunbeams caused them to cast long shadows on the desert floor, just like in her dream. "No," she screamed, then found her scream cut short by the dryness in her throat. She kicked and tried to hit the man as he turned slightly, and her eyes widened at what she saw. The doorway in the desert. She felt helpless in the man's strong grip as the doorway came closer. A doorway into a pitch-black void. As it came even closer, she discerned what it was. The entrance to a mine shaft. Slowly, she found herself focusing on the void intently, and the sun around her began to dim. Everything got darker, until the doorway in alley engulfed her. She fell. She thought she would fall for an eternity to her death or to hell, but she landed on her side on solid ground. I'm gonna be back real soon, and don't go anywhere your power to see the outcome. I have the power too, you know. I gave it to you, the man shouted down at her. He then dropped something heavy on the ground above. Arla surmised it was some old deck to block the entrance. She heard the man's feet faintly stomping across the ground and becoming more distant, until she could hear them no more. Her body ached. She groaned in pain. Her voice echoed in a way that suggested narrow, uneven walls surrounded her somewhere. After a while, she heard a faint, raspy voice, a girl's voice. Looks like you're caught, too, the girl said solemnly. You probably don't even realize. Poor thing, but you're going to die now. He stabbed you. I am so sorry. You will never be the same, but I have to do this, and Arla felt a cold breath on her neck, and then to sharp pinpricks. She slipped into unconsciousness. When Arla awoke, she could see. She saw a carved-out tunnel around her with wooden supports along its length. Everything was shaded with a dark blue. She then flinched at the sight of a girl about her own age, but unbelievably pale and skinny. The girl wore tattered clothing. You can ask. He in the dark. The girl informed her, I'm so sorry. If I hadn't done that, you'd have died. I couldn't let you die. I couldn't. I know I probably should have given you the choice to, but there was no time, and you see, you have the power. Arla was perplexed and terrified. Doubly, what have you done to my vision? Did you do this? Yes, I found ways to. Oh, keep time. It happened to me about 50 years ago. I do not age, you see, but we need to feed. He lets me feed at night, but he sees whatever I will do, so I cannot escape. But with the two of us, there's some chance. Arla was aghast at what she was hearing. She had heard of vampires, but this all felt so strangely different. It felt real. I'm not dreaming, she asserted. He's out feeding. He will be preoccupied. Do it now, the girl said. Dream. Arla then began to dream, and when she awoke, she looked at the girl. What did you see? The girl asked. For the first time in many years, Arla smiled. The girl smiled back. Story 5 Love. Amara, there is always something strange about interrogation rooms. The wooden table that reminds you of the cafeteria at primary school, the cold, tall chair which has housed many horrible people, the scratchy, sandpaper felt blanket, the soft buzzing of the lights above us, the room temperature plastic water bottle they give victims as a quartz. Why, Hammer's shoulder stings under the new bandage they wrapped around her bicep. She runs her fingers through her long, newly brushed hair as the endless sound of pencils scribbling on paper fills the silent room. Amara lifts the water bottle up to her mouth and takes a big gulp, swallowing it with visible difficulty. So then he attacked you with the glass cup, and what happened next? Detective Leonie asks softly, leaning back in his chair opposite of Amara, with his notebook sitting in his lap, pencil in hand. His forehead crinkles in quiet focus. Amara sniffs through her nose and picks at the plastic label, wrapping around half-empty water bottle. I fell to the ground. He got on top of me and hit me. Right here, she pointed. Teased to the left side of her face where a bright bruise is showing, and I just kicked him in the stomach, and I rolled away. But as I was getting up, he grabbed my leg and I fell against the lamp. I'm sore. I don't really remember. Amara adjusts awkwardly in her seat, sounding ashamed and embarrassed. Detective Leonie is writing in his notebook. When Amara glances up at him, he's nodding his head slowly, humming every so often so Amara knows he's listening. And then, what happened? The older uniform man asks, scratching his salt and pepper beard, finally looking up and waiting for Amara. Amara looks back down at the water bottle, label, and chips, away at the sticky part on the inside. Her blonde hair falls off one shoulder, but she doesn't care to move it away. Her shoulders are hunched forward and her hands tightly grasped around the plastic water bottle, so much so that it creaks when she speaks. And then I ran to the kitchen and he caught up with me and Amara goes quiet and still. Her breathing becomes deeper and her shoulders shudder slightly. And is that when you stabbed Mr. Sadet? Detective Leonie speaks softly to Amara, waiting for her to finish the story. Amara lets a few tears fall from her face as she nods. Yes, I did. I was so scared. He was just screaming and screaming. I'm sure the neighbors heard the commotion. I going to jail. Her words are quiet and shaky. Amara begins to cry, her shoulders shaking as tears fall down her chin. Detective Leonie sighs and sets his notebook on top of the wooden table with a soft slap. I can neither confirm or deny that, but off the record. He leans forward in his chair and whispers in a comforting, deep voice, No, you're going to be on your way home within hours. Leonie then stands from his chair, grabbing his notebook and tucking the metal chair nicely into place against the table. I will see you soon, Miss Miller. Do you need anything? A jacket, more water, perhaps an apple or something? Amara looks up at him and wipes her tears, clearing her throat before answering, no. Thank you, though. She offers him a polite smile. He returns it. Then he leaves and Amara returns to her quiet state. Amara glances around the small room, recounting the cracks on the wall, outlining her pointer finger on the scars that cover the wooden table. What a night. Amara closes her eyes and takes a deep breath, holding it in her lungs before releasing it into the cool air. When she opens her eyes a moment later, she once again finds the security camera in the corner of the room pointed straight at her. The tiny blinking red light reminds her to play nice. She's being watched. Tearing her eyes away from the camera, Amara settles onto the small clock hanging on the wall, waiting. Finally, after an hour, Detective Leonie opens the door with a soft smile. Okay, kiddo, you're free to go. Amara smiles with recurring tears in her eyelids. Oh, thank you. Amara stands up and follows Leonie out into the hallway and up to a counter, braced with a large glass wall on top of it. You got the items I asked for. Detective Leonie speaks to an elderly woman on the other side. She nods and pushes up her glasses, squinting her eyes as she reads a label on a large plastic bag. 143. She tilts her head. down, glancing between Amara and Leonie above the rim of her glasses, looking for some kind of confirmation. Leonie nods. Yup, that's it. He grabs the bag from the little hole in the glass before he handing it to Amara. She grabs the ziplock and opens the tab. Oh, my things. Thank you, detective. Amara grabs her iPhone, pressing the power button only to find it's dead. Her fingers feel several small bumps on the back of the case. Amara slowly turns her phone in her hand and sees a few drops of dried blood on the back of the phone case. Amara swallows heavily. He looks at her with a stoic expression, a sliver of pity shining through. He nods once. Let me show you out. Leonie gestures to a larger hallway which leads to the entrance of the building. Asterisk. You done know anything? Ryan. Amara seethed at her boyfriend as she inhaled her cigarette, leaning the back of her head against the hollowed-out window in the wall. She blows the smoke out to the half-opened window of their second-story apartment. Ryan keeps his distance away from the window. I know what you did. You killed them. I found your little murderous keepsake box. He threw down a black cardboard converse shoe box onto the ground, and what came out spilling was anything but surprising. Amara carelessly glances down, but her eyes narrow at the shoe box and the ingredients that are now sprawled on the wooden floor. There is a pair of thin, black glasses with cracked frames and a few tiny spews of deep red droplets on them. Threading out of the box like a snake is a bright multicolored scarf, which is drenched and stiff with dried blood. One end of the scarf is ripped and frayed, as if someone was tugging on it harshly. The items that slid furthest away are 3 pairs of phones, 2 iPhones, and 1 Android, all broken, and a jumbled mess of electronic wires and boxes. She raises her eyes to meet Ryan's eyes. Lifting the cigarette up to her lips, she inhales and holds the burn in her lungs. Fine. Amara tilts her head down to the box and lifts her free hand to her face. She makes a soft kissing sound against her palm before flattening her hand and pursing her lips, blowing the smoke directed at the items. I did kill Toby. He was an okay boyfriend, and I killed his friend and his girlfriend. They were wastes of space. So what? Amara keeps calm and organized, unlike Ryan, who keeps taking minor steps back from her. You got skeletons in your closet, and I have more than enough proof to take to the police. He smirks, like he defeated this large secret. Amara stays still, not frozen but still, like her code is buffering. Amara takes a deep breath through her nose before tossing the butt of the cigar out the cracked window and walks to the kitchen. She opens up a cupboard, grabs a glass cup from the inside, and leaves the cupboard ajar. Amara walks into the living room and finds her place a few paces in front of Ryan. What are you? Ryan begins, but flinches backwards and raises his hands near his face. Jesus, Amara. Amara smashes the glass against her left bicep. She gasps in pain, but keeps some of the shards and tosses them on the ground. As Ryan stays in his self-protective stance, frozen in fear and confusion, Amara takes this as a chance to rush at him. She tackles him to the ground and she scratches and tears at his arms and face before beginning to scream, "Help! Someone help me!" Ryan balls up his fist and he strikes Amara on the side of her face, knocking her off of him and into the tall standing lamp, knocking it over with a crash. In the distance, you can hear the imminent sound of police sirens nearing. Ryan gets up, running out of the living room and into the connected kitchen. Lurching around the small, rectangular island, he reaches for the large kitchen knife, but a bleeding manicured hand reaches for it instead and unleashes it from the kitchen block, pointing it at Ryan. Amara's straight, blonde hair is now overflowing with stray hairs. Her face is red and wild. Her collarbone has a paper-thin cut from the glass shattering. Her shirt all bundled, her left shoulder as soft streams of blood leaking down her arm, leaving a trail of blood in her wake. Amara laughs loudly. "You think you're a smart boy, huh? Little Miss Nancy Drew, look at you, figuring out the puzzle that your girlfriend is a serial killer." She keeps the newly sharpened knife pointed at him, tightly gripping the wooden handle. Ryan's eyes are wide. His hands are shaky with fear as he raises them near his shoulders. "Amara, don't be stupid. The police are minutes away, Don. Do you hear the sirens? That's your reign coming to an end." Amara scoffs, then screams again. "No." "Ryan, get off. Help, help." Amara grabs a vase off the counter and slams it on the ground, stepping forward and grabbing a tin bowl, throwing that against the wall. The flashing red and blue lights now illuminate the second-floor apartment. Ryan shouts at Amara and turns to the door, hearing THE police cars right downstairs. But Ryan collapses to the ground with a deep, guttural scream, clutching his right side, which is gushing with blood, staining his clothes and seeping into the cracks of the hardwood floor. He rolls onto his backhand, stares at Amara with tears streaming down the side of his face. She stands there with a wide stance, dripping knife in hand, and a dark smile. The police lights shine on the right side of Amara's face, and the tunnel of light shining from the toppled over lamp on the left side. The look in her eyes is manic. Ryan gasps in pain. "You aren't getting away with this. They'll catch you. The police are here." Amara pouts her bottom lip in full whirring. "Oh, you little boy. Don't you see? I didn't kill anybody." "You did." She smiles before snapping her head up to the front door, the police banging on the wood, shaking the apartment. "Help, please, my boyfriend. He's crazy." Amara screams and begins to cry. She drops the knife on the ground. "You were a good boyfriend. Pity you had to dig up the past," she whispers, glancing one more last time at Ryan. Amara bolts to the door, flinging it open, and collapses into an officer's arms, wailing and sobbing. Other officers rush into the apartment and take over the apartment scene. Ryan lays on the floor, trying to speak and reach out as the police find him, but the only thing the tea comes up is a gurgled mix of saliva and blood. It trails down his cheek as an officer with a first aid kit rushes over to assist. Ryan rolls his head to the side and watches as the police find evidence of the night: the broken glass, the lamp, the knife, the shoebox of Amara's prior incidents. Ryan's eyes fold close. The rush and urgency of voices fade into a loud ringing in his ears until the only thing seeping through the ringing is Amara's loud cries. "He is a stalker. He killed my ex and my friends. I confronted him, and he went crazy." The murmur of a female officer quiets Amara's thunderous sound down. However, on the stained floor, Ryan's world quiets down. As Amara is led outside to the apartment parking lot, she is given a comforted blanket, a plastic water bottle, and a medic to bandage her shoulder. She sips her water in the back of a police car, letting her feet hang off the side and head resting on the open door frame. Amara Nodik as the large apartment doors open and watches the white cloth-covered stretcher being loaded into the ambulance. She raises the water to her lips and sips from it to hide her smile, setting the water in a lap and wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders to protect her skin from the cold. That's when Amara sees a tall, older man in a long brown coat and suit walking towards her, and the officer standing next to her. He stops a few feet from Amara and holds out his hand to her. "Hello, miss. I am Detective Leonie. Do you mind if we take you down to the Station F for a few questions?" Story 6. Dying in the rain. The cacophony of rain panging off the thin metal of the helmet was maddening. Even as he drifted off into the oblivion of his mind, the nose refused to wrench itself from his ears. The thought of simply pulling it off came back to him every now and then, only to be reminded he was powerless. The heavy wooden pillory he carried around his neck also trapped his hands, and he slowly remembered it was forced onto his head and locked in place. "Where am I?" he thought as he once again regained some lucidity. It was dark. He shifted his weight and knew he was hunched over on his knees. Water pooled around him. He could no longer feel it, but he was freezing cold. Everything came back to him in waves and left just as quickly: the blood and the killing, the beasts, and the horrible misery of it all. The battle played in his head as if it happened all in an instant. The frick killed all his people. I lost ... single quotes. He felt Lightning Joe hit his body. Where's the girl? The name came to his head. Avina. Avina. With what was still in him, he willed his body to stand, but all strength was robbed from him long before then. He leant forward and fell, the weight of his body slamming the wooden pillory into his throat. His head splashed in a puddle, and the water began to pool in through the holes in the helmet's visor. He felt it chill his cheek as the taste of mud spilled into his mouth. I lost. Suddenly he was dragged up, or the pillory was, and he with it. His head hung heavy, and an orange beam broke through the darkness as, tilling in through the slit in the visor, he struggled to adjust his eyes to focus through the light. There was someone there. The figure loomed large above him, shadowed by the light that burned behind him. He couldn't make out the face. There was no face, no eyes, but the dim whiteness of his skull was unmistakable. Death looked down on him. He had covered himself in a black cloak that draped over his shoulders. There were no eyes, but his glare persisted. Another figure adjusted him back up, not with care, but an animalistic tear, and almost dislocated the young man's shoulder. On his knees again, he could see Famine release his arm, the fur of his headpiece dripping wet. The horseman stood and gave a silent look to his brother in arms, whose skull gave the slightest of nods before turning away. The man thought to demand answers, but his voice failed to come out. Famine grabbed the chain attached to the pillory just below the man's chin and suddenly drew him to his feet. With little strength he trudged behind them, on feeble and trembling legs, his bare feet ice cold in the muddy rainwater. Famine pulled him behind Death, who walked beside his pale horse from which a lantern burned. Their footsteps were both heavy, the clanking of Death's metal armor drum powerfully against even the storm. There were more lights in the distance, difficult as to see. He lifted his head to get a view and saw a horse-drawn carriage was stopped in the road with more lanterns strewn about its frame. 2 men stood beside it along with a few horses. The oath, our 2 horsemen, War and Pestilence, stood and seemed to wait for the young man to arrive. Pestilence began to approach as soon as his fellow horsemen drew near. His white vestments soaked completely through. He smirked. "Have you had your fun?" he asked in a chiding tone. "No," Famine hissed. He pulled the chain, and the young man was pulled back on to the mud once again with a heavy splash. "Why do we have to do this? They're going to kill him anyway," his rough voice growled like some creature. Pestilence said, "They want to do it in a place people will see they want justice by the book, so they are going to kill me," he thought. It made sense, though it was funny. These infamous figures following someone else's orders did come as some surprise. They seemed more like creatures a witch would summon in some dark ritual. "It's not fair," Famine shouted. "This one was ours. We have to play the game on this one," Pestilence said in an even tone. The young man couldn't help but wonder who these people were to each other. Those 2 especially, Pestilence and Famine, seemed so different. The ale-maker was a noble, no doubt. He had that air about him and spoke like an educated man, but Famine was as far from that as could be, little more than a starving dog. "I want my pound of flesh," the wild man continued. Pestilence laughed. "Hungry?" The prisoner felt the stir of fear in his chest as Famine glared down at him. "No," Famine hissed, "he's not special. The meat would taste like shit anyway." Meat, the man's mind raced. They talked about it so casually, like they had this conversation before. The horrors in his homeland caused by the old rulers were what their homeland used as a reason to invade Washington, conveying their moral superiority around like a banner. Brutality in war was one thing, but it seemed they had their own monsters. Death stepped forward, leaning his skull face to Pestilence's ear. Here were no words the man could hear, but breath escaped from under the dirty teeth of his face. He was a man after all. Pestilence placed his hand on Death's shoulder, a metallic clank audible from their armor meeting. He pulled him to the side, seemingly to speak. With some effort, the man attempted to turn his head to follow them, whatever it was they were. Speaking about it seemed important. The white of Pestilence's garb made it hard to lose him in the darkness as they stepped away from the lights, but Death's black armor and cloak made him disappear almost immediately, save the skull that loomed alone in the shadows. A clank echoed in his helmet, shocking the young man's senses. He recoiled, believing for a moment he was being attacked once again, but soon understood it to be a knock at the door of sorts. Turning his head back, he saw the 4th of the horsemen, War, crouched over him with his cape tucked over his arm to keep it from the mud. The screaming, metal face emblazoned on his visor was quite the intimidating sight, hovering a mere foot from the prisoner's own face. "Hello," called out War. His deep voice was somehow cordial. He tilted the visor up into his helmet and showed his face. He was a pale man in his 40s with a deep red beard, weirdly similar to the face on the Weiss. "Or, I've a question," he asked. Despite it all, he seemed affable. The young man couldn't muster up any words, but decided there was nothing to lose in listening. He moved his head enough to lift the helmet slowly up before letting it slump back down in the mud, hoping it looked something like a nod. War smiled. So he began, I understand why ye adopted the persona of fine fee. You're to rally support behind while hiding your identity. Famine scoffed. He's just a coward. War looked over his shoulder to his ally. There's such a thing as a sore winner, lad, he said as if a scolding father. Famine turned his head away, clearly bitter, as War looked back to his mud-soaked captive. Now War continued. My question is, why the yellow lioness? The persona, was it a deliberate choice, or did ye just happen upon the helmet and decide that was good enough? Though he couldn't answer, the young man found the question peculiar. What did it matter any more now that he was exposed? He can't speak any more. Famine chimed in after War waited patiently for an answer. After a brief consideration, War grabbed the man's ice-cold hand. One finger for yes, 2 fingers for no. War smiled as if he were a friend. This would almost certainly be the last friendly touch the young man would have, and he couldn't even feel it. Either from the hands of an executioner or perhaps an illness he was contracting at that very moment. He would die. He wouldn't plead for it. His life was not something he saw as precious, and he had already failed his duty. There was only one thing left in his world he would fight for. Something near inaudible escaped the poor man's lips, and War let down to hear, almost pressing his ear to the helmet. Of dotty was all the young man could force out of himself. War raised his head. The last War asked. A cold finger raised as the young man shouted in his mind, Avina, Avina. He had to see her one more time. She had to be safe. It could not be for nothing. War nodded. She's safe. With her we've won, but you know that. She's sleeping now. Answer my questions, and lines let ye see her. There was hope in those words. Don't make promises, called out a voice. It was Pestilence, Death standing to his back. War looked at them and waved with a smile. What are you doing? Pestilence continued. Research. War said. A new ballad? Pestilence asked, some exhaustion in his voice. War stood. Anyone who crosses blades with us and lives to tell about it deserves some recognition. He didn't, said Pestilence. He died of his wounds. War tilted his head. Their captive, despite freezing in the rain, felt his blood run cold, and, oh, he thought, not yet. War crossed his arms and smirked, his head looking back and forth between Pestilence and Death. I see. Little brother caught your ear, did he? Pestilence smiled, looked at Eth out of the corner of his eye before stepping past. War, we did our best. We took him as far as we could. He approached Famine and placed a hand on his shoulder. You don't come to us and expect a light touch. Famine seemed to perk up. Pestilence walked away towards the horses. Don't take all night. Strip the body of the shackles and toss it deep into the woods. War looked down at the young man, pulled his visor back down and turned to follow Pestilence. Death grabbed his horse by the leads and began walking into the dark forest as Famine yanked the chain up to bring his prisoner to his feet. The young man felt terror rise in him. In vain he tried to pull against his chain, but knew he was powerless. The girl, the only thing he wanted, was slipping away. He was promised. That bastard, he shrieked in his head. He made me hope, ripped it away for nothing. Famine followed Death and pulled the prisoner with him. Desperately, the young man allowed himself to fall into the mud, allowing all his weight to anchor him there. Famine pulled with all his might. and slowly dragged his dead weight through inches of cold filth. Avi, he tried to call out with a hoarse and broken voice. Ave-en ... He felt his throat ache and strain. Famine turned back, approached, and pulled viciously on the chain, bringing the young man to his knees once more. Lad, a voice called out over the rain. It was that friendly voice War had used. With nothing to lose, the man tilted his head over to see. War stood beside the carriage, holding a little bundle of blankets in his arms, his eyes strained to see at that distance, but the reflection of the light against the strands of yellow hair shine like a beacon. Avina, he cried, the very last of his strength creeping back up into his throat. The girl, who was half asleep, snapped back to herself and understood who was under the helmet. She struggled to free herself from War's grasp as he stood unmoving like a statue. Father, she cried. He cried again, Avina, Avina. Before being set to the ground, having been struck in the head by a heavy Saint-Heel boot, he lay on his back, water dripping into his eyes and mouth. The dark figure stood above him, then reached down and grabbed the chain at the base of his throat. The horseman pulled him up with no effort and dragged his feet behind him through the rainwater. Death finally was taking him. It was all over. Pulled into darkness, the little cries vanishing into distance, the cacophony of rain panging off. The thin metal of the helmet was maddening. Story 7, when there's a saying, a small pebble drop into a pound has the potential to create the largest of ripples. Clearly, why? The theme here is, despite how minor or trivial something appears to be, it capable of creating astronomical ripples throughout an entire universe. The following story provides a perspective of an intelligent, caring kind-hearted man named Courtnall, who becomes dreary, eclipsing his friends, loved ones, and eventually his world into obscurity. This is courtesy to an ordinary action Courtnall received from someone evoking a fantasy nightmare. We began our story at the Arizona State Fair. It's late at night during the graveyard shift, composed of 5 CSR. Alex is one of the CS making her routine rounds, which checks to be normal until she hears a thrashing sound, preceded a short painful scream. Alex cautiously searches through the night, tracking the commotion to a nearby barnyard where Alex discovers an astonishing revelation. Courtnall, is that you? Alex asked. Alex stands in disbelief as she stares towards a fellow CSR who's also a dear friend named Courtnall. Battered and looted lay out on the floor. Why is Alex stunned by this, you might be asking? Alex spent her break with Courtnall dressed in a standard CSR uniform just an hour ago. Despite how suspicious of the current situation of Q. Houston's, Alex decides to go against her good judgment and help the injured Courtnall. It's that very moment Alex uncovers a startling discovery. Courtnall isn't the man she worked and hung out with all these years. She discovers this while attending Courtnall's injuries. This led to Alex touching Courtnall's body, having a watery skin texture feeling. Shortly after, Courtnall's facial appearance starts to match it. Alex quickly breaks away from Courtnall, placing several feet of distance between the two of them. Alex wisely radio in for assistance. Coincidentally, the first CSR to respond is Courtnall, perplexing Alex even more. Wait, please don't leave. I can explain everything. Just stay with me, Courtnall said. This Courtnall's voice gives off a sound as if his mouth is full of water. However, Alex decides to grant Crittel's plea, but take precautions by radio and for backup. I don't think it's wise radio your friends say you found a wounded copy of Courtnall, Courtnall said. Indeed, that's why I texted them, Alex said. Courtnall barely smiles, discovering how smart Alex was on her feet. Courtnall informs Alex he's from a different universe almost like hers. You don't say what happened to it, and how did you get here? Alex asked. I happened escaping as a result, Courtnall replied. Courtnall flashes back while telling Alex of his story, answering the questions where he's from, why he was here, how did he arrive here, and others pending important questions. Courtnall starts at his version of the Arizona State Fair. Only his version consists of black-reddish skies, complemented by monstrous mini-size Volkswagen flying breasts, soars down, gripping their razor-shaped claws into people, flying them hundreds of feet in the air, drooping some and ripping apart others. Below the fairground lays multiple of humans, bloody, broken, and tore bodies. Given the brutal, sinister, hellish description, it fails in comparison of the true terror. A skyscraper-sized black purplish female demonic creature stands over this nightmarish scene, basking in the terror. Seconds later, the monstrous female entity turns its attention to Ard's three cages, all dangling from the highest point off the grandstand, and stares with a sinister glare. Meanwhile, outside the Arizona State Fair grounds perimeter was military and National Guard fully surrendering the perimeter, where they attempted several strategies to penetrate through a strange yellowish silky substance's cocoon around the fairground arena, but fail every time now, early assuring demonic supreme reign. However, there were some brave souls reluctant or stubborn to concede their lives. Few in numbers, but strong in bravery, the remaining CES are led by Alex Journey, though the hellish fairgrounds, combating devilish monsters. Tragically, some CES didn't survive the end of Journey, which was the grandstand. Every CES casualty. Alex weighed with guilt. Eventually, in time, she would become nearly numb to the causalities. Alex becomes enraged with herself, pondering she's turning into Courtnall, that soulless bastard responsible for this nightmare. Alex focuses on the simple but deadly task ahead: stop the gigantic female monstrous entity by capturing or killing its master, Courtnall. Alex dreaded the thought of taking Courtnall's life, despite the many lives killed, all due to his vengeful heart unleashing these hellish monsters. Alex locates Courtnall sitting on a thorn midsection of the grandstand. Alex carefully creeps behind Courtnall, will he reminiscing of past times she shared with Courtnall, also the event that would ultimately lead Courtnall into this dark path. One day, working a late-night shift at the Air grounds, Courtnall worked with another CES named Melissa for the first time. Their time together working wasn't long, but Melissa tells Courtnall she's impressed by his smarts and dreams of becoming a scientist one day. That simple gesture done by Melissa becomes the catalyst. Besides Alex, Melissa was only female to show genuine support to Courtnall's dream that she was married. So Courtnall came up with the idea, seeking out a female who resembles Melissa. Several months later, Courtnall successful finding such a female named Rosetta. Unfortunately, Rosetta didn't share the similar respective personality as Melissa, using Courtnall's love and caring heart for her own selfish agenda. This resulted in Courtnall dropping out of school, bitter to life itself, including his family eventually hanging with undeserving individuals. During his Sparrow downfall, Courtnall disappears for a while, leaving everyone who knew him and acquainted with. Courtnall's whereabouts aren't clear. However, it is said his madness drove him into the teachings of the occult, utilizing his scientific intelligence to enhance it. What's clear is Courtnall returned to the Arizona State Fair attached and empowered with supernatural abilities, thus bringing this hell on Earth flew in a maddening rage, using his scientific intelligence, casting the current hell upon today. You don't deserve a woe, man like Melissa. Still, I wonder what Melissa would think of you if she could see you now, Alex asked. Courtnall slowly stands up from his throne, donning an unhinged smirk on his face. It's been nearly a year since they stood face to face. To Alex, her friend looks detached for humanity, but Courtnall, on the other hand, is pleased to see Alex. Hello, bestie. Looks like you've been through some battles, Courtnall said. Yea. No thanks to you, Alex said. Courtnall offers to clean up Alex and the rest of the CSRS if only she would submit to him. Of course, Alex declines his offer and informs Courtnall this is where his madness ends. Courtnall didn't take pleasure in calling him madness, so he orders his gigantic dark purplish female silhouette to lower the 3 cages, thus relieving 3 individuals. Courtnall asks Alex to choose one of them, but she refuses to play Courtnall's game. It made no difference to Courtnall, granting his giant, dark, purplish female monster to choose, picking the first of 3 cages, revealing a black middle-aged male. Inside, Courtnall becomes overjoyed with his demonic breast's choice, shouting his praise to it. Raymond hails the piece of shit I became. He later acquainted with during decent in life right after Rosetta ripped my heart out, Courtnall said. Courtnall continues, stating Raymond used him just like Rosetta used him, but this time it was or money. Courtnall is disgusted by a man manipulates another man for anything, later calling Raymond a disgrace to men. I entrust the punishment to you, my giant friend, Courtnall said. The gigantic shadowed covered monster female acknowledges Courtnall's order and grabs Raymond from his cage. The giant female monsters cover Raymond with both hands, while horrific screams are heard coming within the demons' hands. The screams are silent, only odd animal sound is later heard. The female demon slowly opens both her hands to revealing this monster has turned Raymond into a troll-like Brea. Hasty from hell, Alex is terrified to witness something so sinister. Please, Alex, this guy Raymond is the reason why the world fucked up, Courtnall said. The second cage, chosen by the monstrous female giant, happens to be Rosetta herself. Courtnall is slightly taken by surprise by this reveal, seeing a crying Rosetta gradually crawling out the cage. Courtnall relished the sight of Rosetta's pathetic state that's shortly interrupted by his dark purplish giant female monster speaks in a deep voice. I lions place a spell upon her, granting to do as you wish, the giant female monster said. It would please Courtnall nothing more, using Rosetta as he deems, just as she did before, how he deems fit as Rosetta. However, Courtnall takes the opportunity to conversate with her. Rosetta is fully willing to be him and cooperate with his heart's desires, then kisses him. At first Courtnall stood quiet, then became teary-eyed. This left both Alex and Rosetta lost. All I wanted was to love you, but your rapt, sick mind wouldn't allow that. Out the hell with you, bitch, Courtnall said. Rosetta is then sent into a portal where she will live out an interloop of all her bad relationships. Courtnall, end this madness before it's too late, Alex shouts. It's too late already, Courtnall said. Courtnall orders to bring down the final cage. The monstrous black purplish monster does so. Only this time Courtnall experiences an unpleasant surprise. Melissa? What the hell she's doing here? Courtnall asked. Melissa drops out of the cage tire and is scared. Before her body reaches the ground, Courtnall catches her in his arms. As a scared Melissa lays in his arm, Courtnall ensures Melissa everything will be fine, only to be the opposite. The demonic female giant ignores Courtnall's question at first, but Courtnall continues, shouting at the gigantic female breast, evokes it to reveals its sinister plan of possessing Melissa's body. What? No malice. SIA is the loving person I know, and she will not be harmed. This I command, Courtnall said. You pose nitrogen monoxide control over me. I will pose Melissa and have impregnate me, spawning first of many children. The giant female monster said. Courtnall glares with towards the female monster, having yet to use once more. Meanwhile, Alex is in chills after hearing the giant female monster's plan. Nevertheless, Alex develops a plan using the monster's betrayal for advantage. Now your big ugly monster girlfriend wants the woman you can only dreams of. It looks like you need help, Alex said. Wasting no time, Courtnall pulls out a round spear and throws it to the giant demonic female. The spear beaks released a liquid substance that began burning the giant monster. Quickly, Alex, follow behind me, Courtnall said. Alex didn't trust Courtnall, but she had very little choice. That liquor isn't going to stop the female monster. Courtnall carries Melissa with Alex and what's left of the CS-2T. He's south end of the fairgrounds, where Courtnall gently lays down Melissa and starts to perform a ritual involving magic and science, resulting in a portal opening. Go and take Melissa with you. L will hold off the monster. Double quotes. Courtnall is too late. The monster has recovered and smashes the rest of CSR, launching Alex, Courtnall, and Melissa into the air. Courtnall quickly gets on his feet. And hears Alex screaming his name, causing him to face her direction. Courtnall wept as he sees Alex holding a lifeless Melissa's body. Equipped with the ability of telekinesis, Courtnall levitates a large half of a building and throws it in the monster direction, crucially injuring it on top of the monster. He then takes one final glance at Alex before apologizing for all the destruction and deaths he has caused. Now go. This planet has seen its laws, Courtnall said. Alex jumps inside the portal while bursts of explosion are seen behind her. Fast forward to the current time, where a wounded Courtnall lays out. He continues apologizing to Alex, still with guilt for all the deaths and destruction he caused. Courtnall then reaches out to Alex. She grabs hold of it. Alex pleads for Courtnall to hold on, but Courtnall gives in to injuries, the best of him with his dying breath. Courtnall tells Alex to remind her Courtnall to never forget who you are. Sure, I will, but when? Alex asked. Courtnall dies and his body melts down into a petal of water. Seconds later, Courtnall enters the barnyard, noticing Alex upset. Courtnall asks Alex what's wrong and where's the emergency. With a saddened expression, Alex simply stares at Courtnall while asking the question, ... When is the day do I need to remind you of who you are before you turn to madness, destroying all of humanity? Alex asked.